Hello interwebs and welcome to my third video on a problematic creator this week. So I've been having a really great week. How about you? Hey everybody, before we get started on this video, I just want to let everyone know that the audio at the top of this video is a bit worse for wear just because of something that happened with my mic. It does get fixed about, halfway through the video, but I just wanted to apologize that there's some audio issues at the top of this. But please stick with it because I think it's important to say, and it does get better towards the latter half of the video. So jumping off of that, jumping right in. But yes, today we are going to be talking about the recent firing of Gina Carano from the Mandalorian series, the Star Wars Mandalorian series, as well as presumably her role in the larger Star Wars expanded universe, considering that Disney is expanding a lot of their television productions for Star Wars, and Gina Carano presumably was supposed to have a larger role in those upcoming projects, at least one of them in particular, that she no longer will have, as well as her firing from her talent agency. So for this video, I want to discuss why she was fired and my feelings on why she was fired, as well as, to a much lesser degree, kind of reframe an earlier video that I did months ago about Gina Carano that I see a lot of people are going back to today in light of the recent events surrounding Gina, and sort of either misconstruing or misunderstanding what I was trying to say and discuss in that video, because while I do stand by a lot of the things that I said in that video surrounding her views on transgender people and statements on transgender people and transgender topics, a lot of things have evolved since then that sort of reframe the discussion around Gina Carano. So I just want to make my stance clear in the light of the fact that I did do an earlier video on her. So, Gina Carano was essentially fired recently for a post that she did on her Instagram account, which basically likened the politicization today of the left versus the right and the sort of like polarized discourse that we have in the United States. She likened that to Nazi Germany in a post that basically said, back in the day in Nazi Germany, Jews were killed in the streets by German, not their neighbors. Sort of likening today that today people were being killed in the streets by their neighbors, by people that they know, which is problematic on so many different levels. It's hard to even get into it. I mean, first things first, back in Germany, the whole thing that Nazis did was galvanize people against their neighbors, that it wasn't just Nazi officers going into Jewish people's homes and killing them. It was actually neighbors ratting out revealing where Jewish people were hiding, sort of hating Jewish people, discriminating against Jewish people in everyday things like businesses and stuff like that. So, flat out, just factually, she's just incredibly wrong, because it wasn't just Nazis killing Jewish people in Nazi Germany. Number two, likening what's going on today to Jews being killed in the Holocaust, one of the most disgusting and despicable events in human history, is kind of not okay. On many levels, it's clearly anti-Semitic, also just hyperbolicizing and sort of deflating what the importance and harm that event caused. Not to say that things today aren't scary and hard and dangerous, but clearly, based on a lot of the other posts that Gina Carano was talking about, she sort of sees herself as the victim in a lot of these situations in cancel culture, as it were. So likening herself to a Jewish person being murdered in the Holocaust is just, it's a particular level of, at the very least, completely misunderstanding the ramifications of an event like that, to put it very, very mildly. So that was sort of what spurned Disney's firing of Gina Carano, as well as her talent agency from firing her. But this also comes on the back of months of really, really problematic posts from Gina Carano. I know a lot of people took my earlier video where I talked about her views on trans people as like that was the thing, that was the reason why she was fired. But to quick go over that, she basically kind of had this push and pull within a lot of people on social media where she kind of made fun of the use of preferred pronouns, people putting their pronouns in their Twitter bios and things like that, like people saying, like myself, I use she, her, they, them pronouns, and I put that in my bio. So she made fun of it doing bleep, bloop, bleep, sort of like droid sound effects because she's in Star Wars, and that sort of created this whole backlash where a lot of people on social media were sort of attacking her, insulting her, and so because she's like a fighter, she likes to push back. She doesn't just take things on the chin. She always like pushes back in sort of the harshest way possible. She started doubling down and making fun of people and sort of going off against trans people and the cancel culture and, you know, the trans ideology and trans agenda, that whole thing. And my video on that subject was kind of taking a look at that that from a distanced view and sort of understanding both sides of that debate. And I do still stand by that to a fairly large degree, that Gina Carano, did not understand the importance and why sharing pronouns was important. You can look at my video to discuss the specifics on that. And I think the reaction on social media was overly hyperbolicized, as most things on social media are, which then, like I said, causes her to get defensive and push back instead of actually listening. And it just created an all-around deconstructive conversation instead of a constructive one, where if maybe people had sat down and actually talked to Gina about things, like maybe if someone like Pedro Pascal, who clearly understands transgender issues, considering that his sister recently came out as trans and he was super supportive of her, which is absolutely wonderful. If she had been able to have that chance to sort of actually have a conversation rather than a social media fight, it would have probably gone better. And so, while I did not agree with what Gina Carano says and think what she said was kind of toxic and horrible and painful, I sort of understand why she was sort of pushed into that sort of viewpoint, because social media hyperbolicizes things and pushes people into the worst possible position instead of actually creating conversations. We've seen this over and over and over again with numerous creators of different levels, from people like William Shatner to J.K. Rowling, and I've done videos on them as well and how this phenomenon constantly works. So those are social media posts that were very problematic, but not only that, Gina Carano also, after that fact, started sharing some really, really other harmful stuff on Twitter that has no excuses with being misunderstanding. She shared conspiracy theories about the recent U.S. election, for example, as well as many different things on like vaccines and anti-masking as well. Sort of a lot of like conspiracy theories that we know leads to harmful effects of people not being willing to wear masks, which we know is necessary right now because of the pandemic, which actually does help things, as well as the election fraud, which, the allegations of election fraud led to its own whole thing. Basically, she was sort of caught in the larger trends that we've seen within politics of the past few years that, in my opinion, have led to direct harm of many different groups. So given all of that, it was basically revealed that Disney kind of was trying to find a way to let her loose, or find a reason to let her loose for a while, and that it's sort of been in the works for a while, and the sort of anti-Semitic post about the Holocaust was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, or probably put it better, would probably be just the most recent excuse that they could use to sort of like point to fire her. Now, because of all of this, I certainly 100% understand why Gina Carano was fired, but I think it's important to address some of the backlash towards this firing and what people are saying around Gina Carano being firing, because I think it's a constant refrain that we've seen a bunch of times, and I want to try and take them in good faith and try and see where people are upset and what we might be able to learn from this situation. Now, clearly, her firing has led to a lot of people yelling cancel culture, that, Gina Carano was just stating her opinions and she shouldn't be canceled. She shouldn't, have her voice silenced. That this is a free speech issue. She's allowed to say whatever she wants, and she shouldn't have to be fired for saying, her opinions. Now, as I hopefully made clear earlier in the video, I believe a lot of the things that she has said are expressly harmful. Is she the most harmful person when it comes to saying these things? No. I don't think that her views on trans people, for example, were... I think most of her views on trans people at least came from just a place of misunderstanding. But then you get into things like, election fraud and anti-masking. We know that sharing those conspiracy theories are directly harmful to many people. They lead to less people wearing masks. They lead to people feeling that they need to storm the Capitol, things like that. I'm not saying that she is the one that's directly responsible for those things, but using her platform to share those ideas is expressly harmful. And then the anti-Semitic post, the likening of the Holocaust to her situation, is just kind of gross and disgusting and completely misunderstands history, context, and places herself as the victim akin to people in the Holocaust. It's really gross. It is honestly all of it just really, really gross. And I have always said, you are free to share as much as you want about that. I'm not saying that Gina Carano shouldn't be able to share those things. If that's what she wants to share, as much as I disagree with them, as much as I think they are harmful, I think in our society she has a right to share them. But that does not mean she has a right to a platform. She does not have the right to have a job on Star Wars at Disney. She was not canceled. She was fired for saying some pretty horrible things. And I understand Disney not wanting to give a larger platform, given that Star Wars is one of the biggest franchises in the world, letting someone have access to that attention and platform to be able to spread things that, in my opinion, and probably a lot of people in Disney's opinion, or at the very least, Disney's opinion, where they see that other people who give them money view it as a problem. Because I believe that if this wasn't going to affect their bottom line, they wouldn't have cared. But anyways, I understand them not wanting to give her that platform anymore. So she can go on about her day and continue to say these things as much as she wants and as much as she likes. And I'm not here to stop her. I'm not here to tell her she can't. But I am here to say that I don't want her in a Star Wars show, and I'm thankful that Disney listened. As much as I don't like how capitalism works and the cynical reasoning for that, I would have rathered it not be for a cynical capitalist reason, but I at least appreciate it. So in the end, she can say whatever she wants, but this was not cancel culture. It was someone being fired for views that were harmful, for saying views that were harmful. Again, she has a right to free speech. She does not have right to a platform. And that's, I think, something that people get very confused about quite often, that many people try to argue for, is like, oh, she lost a platform, that someone doesn't have access to being on a TV show or being in a movie or, being able to give a speech at a college or things like that, that it's, ruining their free speech. It's like, no, they're allowed to say whatever they want. They're just not allowed to say whatever they want, wherever they want. That people who own a platform do not have to give it to them. They don't have a right. They don't have a right to that platform from other people. The other thing, too, that I want to kind of touch upon with this is that when things like this happen, when someone like Gina Carano gets deplatformed, I guess would be the best way to put it, for saying certain things about trans people, or at least people can draw the connection to, like, oh, she said things about trans people, that's why she got canceled, even though I don't think that was the direct reason. It leads to a backlash against minority communities over and over and over again. As I said before, I did a video on Gina Carano earlier that was kind of not necessarily on her side, but at least trying to view her side of things with a sense of compassion and understanding and give as much credence to her and deference to her as was possible in that situation. I hope I did a decent job of doing so. But even though that's what I did in the video, since Gina Carano's firing, a lot of people have come back to that video in the comments and started insulting me and started attacking me for being trans. Like, oh, you trans people with your trans agenda, getting people canceled, how dare you? And saying much worse things than that, saying like, trans people are gross and disgusting, and going after trans people for being trans because they see it as connecting to Gina Carano's being attacked. And like I said, I am in no way saying that the hyperbolic attacking that Gina Carano faced for her viewpoints at that time were in any way right or justified. No one should face death threats or abuse or bullying in any way, shape, or form. But to then use that to justify doing it to trans people, to a marginalized group that already faces a heavy amount of discrimination, is really patently gross and disgusting. And it constantly happens. We see it with so many different creators. Someone like J.K. Rowling, for example, to use a sort of larger example. I'm not saying Gina Carano is on the same level as J.K. Rowling, but to use a larger example of this, every time I do a video on J.K. Rowling, even ones where, again, I try my best to pay as much deference to J.K. Rowling as is humanly possible in this situation, I still receive abuse for being trans. And I'm sure many other trans people face much the same. And I have developed a thick skin because I am a creator doing these things, that I'm used to this sort of thing. Being a visible trans person just means you're going to get that sort of thing. But this always falls down on trans people who don't necessarily have the same platform that I do. They don't have the same toolbox that I have to protect my mental health. Because I've developed a mental health toolbox over the years, and even I still face a lot of issues related to the abuse that I face. Not to the same level that I used to, but it's definitely there. And again, I've developed a toolbox to help that. But that constantly happens. And I think it's gross and disgusting, and something that we need to talk about, that when things like this happen, there is a huge backlash against minorities over and over and over again. And it's not right. It is patently gross and disgusting. And that's not me saying that everything that Gina Carano faced in terms of the hyperbolicization that she faced, in terms of the bullying that she faced, was okay too. It wasn't. But you don't get to turn around and just bring it back on other people, especially when the reasons that she was fired were understandable. And the last thing, too, that I want to kind of point out is I see people kind of bemoaning the fact that, like, oh, we lost a strong woman in Star Wars, that, you know, you need to have a strong woman in Star Wars, and she was just sharing her opinions, and now we lost that in Star Wars. Like, I don't want someone like Gina Carano in Star Wars if that's the type of person, that's the type of, you know, strongness of character that she is going to display. I would much rather, I want to have women in Star Wars. There needs to be more women in Star Wars. Star Wars, for the most part, has been fairly male-centric up until very, very recently. So I do want more women in Star Wars, but I want women who, both behind the scenes and in front of the camera, display that. Display true character. And I'm not saying I have to agree with every single opinion that someone behind the scenes of a show that I like has. I don't always. But I want them to be compassionate, understanding, listen to people. Honestly, I know for some people it doesn't matter, but for me, it really does make a difference when the people behind a work that I watch are good people too. That I know that the people that I'm watching that are creating a thing actually do the work to try to listen, to be empathetic. And again, I don't always have to agree, but I always at least appreciate the fact that the people behind the scenes are compassionate, caring people who become role models. Become important role models. There's no doubt that someone like Mark Hamill, who played Luke Skywalker, has become a role model to so many. And so I would, if someone's going to be a role model, I want them to show that type of character that Gina Carano, in my opinion, does not show. Yes, she's tough. Yes, she can beat someone up. But beating someone up is not the only shine of character. In fact, it's probably the least sign of character. But this is why I love things like Star Trek Discovery, for example. Star Trek Discovery, far and away not a perfect show. I love it to death, though, for several reasons, but not the least of which is the fact that so many of the actors and creatives behind that show are kind, caring people. You know, I see stories of, like, Sonequa Martin Green, the lead on Star Trek Discovery, going up and giving hugs to guest actors on the show. That when a new actor or someone comes on the show, the cast of Discovery welcomes them and gives them hugs and sort of talks to them and allows them to feel appreciated, even if they're there for a single line on an episode. That is nice to know. And in light of things like Joss Whedon's abuse allegations that have been discussed recently, Gina Carano, J.K. Rowling, things like that, it's just nice to know that the things that I love are not only helpful to a swath of people in pop culture who watch them, but also helpful to the people behind the scenes too. It sucks that someone like Charisma Carpenter, who was abused by Joss Whedon, or allegedly abused, I should say, by Joss Whedon on the sets of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel, that she went through that and had to suffer that. And while I'm very glad to have Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel, I am really disturbed by the fact that it came at the expense of Charisma Carpenter's mental health and feeling of safety. I wish that trade-off didn't happen. Can't change it, but it exists. And again, not likening Gina Carano to the level of Joss Whedon. I think there's a difference, a distinct difference in the level, but I'm just using big examples to sort of display these things. And so I hope that if Star Wars will continue, one, it does have more women behind the scenes and in front of the camera, and number two, that they hire women who can be role models, who can stand up for compassion and empathy and understanding and still being tough, but something more than that too. And something that I don't believe Gina Carano showed. Again, with me trying my best to give her as much deference as I possibly can. All right, before we wrap out, just a couple quick announcements. Because this video came out today because I wanted to release this video on Gina Carano, my big video that I usually do on Friday is going to be going up tomorrow at, 11 a.m. So please join me at the premiere 11 a.m. on Saturday for that video. I'm very excited about it. I think it's going to be a very cool video and on a very important topic as well. So please join me tomorrow for that. But beyond all of that, please don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to comment. Don't forget I have a Patreon where you can help me out and help me do this channel and help me one day do this full time. But beyond all of that, I hope that you, as always, live long and prosper. Patrons, you are my patrons. You are so awesome. So here are your names. Catherine Lambeth, Eli Berg-Moss, Ashley Allen, Bo Kikio, Miranda Janelle, Ashlyn Solstice, Greg Gillim, Stephen Kleinard, Camille T, Randy Thompson, Stephen Schuhart, Boyd Earl, and Mary Beth Earl, Wellington Marcus, Wayne Twitchell, Rick Osborne, Roar, Ish the Mad, Piston Twisted Garage, Dominic Noble, Buttoneer, John Steele, Michael Beam, Gavin Robinson, Carmen Olson, William Stewart, Amanda Ronyadania, Hannah F., Nathan Olson, Andrew Jorgensen, BBD, Jason Knott, Maeve, saying it twice because I can, Andrew K., Bree Beecher, Jasmine, Nathan Steele, Skylar Gray, Lily, Tiffany Danger, Sean Piper, Wen Dizzle Bizzle, Bush, Jane Packard, Geek Filter, Mari Neckard, Jacob Tovar, Polymenia, Celestial Dawn, Jean Mithun, Sarah Bystam Din, Mark the Edge, Corey Honkanen, and Vale the Pale Dunn, Lysa, W. Randy Eady, Andrew Lamoureux, Zone 1 Librarian, and finally, Michael Hardy. I am sorry for that, but seriously, thank you so much, patrons. You really mean the world to me, and you really are changing my life, even if I may have changed your life for the worst with my singing. Thank you so much for all of your support.